Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion today. We are having a lot of participants coming in as well. So as we know, this panel is focusing on a very interesting region. Personally, we are all connected to the region and have been hearing a lot about the region as well, which is South Asia. So the title is From Hub of Spice Trade to Global Lead in Tech and Entrepreneurship, where we will talk about the challenges and success stories coming from South Asia. Just to give everyone a bit idea about the topic or the context of the discussion today. So as we all know that the Indian subcontinent has been a historical hub of trade and commerce for centuries. Businessmen and explorers from all across the world have ventured for South Asia to explore the region's unique assembly of spice, cultural practices, art, cuisine, industries, and most importantly, the people. During the recent decades, what we have been seeing that South Asia has become a global tech hub or an important hub of entrepreneurship, which is mainly based in the tech aspect to it. South Asian innovators and solutions have brought significant impact economies and some of the largest economies in the world. The region covers almost 4.5 square kilometer, 4.5 million square kilometer area, which is almost 12% of the Asian continent itself. And it's a home to 2 billion resilient people. I'd like to say that again, which is 2 billion resilient people. That's the beauty of the ecosystem here. The ecosystem has a lot of problems, a lot of obstacles, but resilience has helped it to grow and come this far. So today in the panel, we'll be exploring the glorious past of South Asia, the potential future of the region, the challenges to overcome, and definitely define what South-Asian-ness means with the discussion here, connecting friends from Pakistan, from India, and Nepal to discuss about the challenges, the opportunities, and see what else connects South Asia apart from love for music, love for movie, love for TV series, and love for biryani. So let's get into the discussion today. We have Usama joining us from Pakistan, Bikash from Nepal, and Vaibhav from India. So before starting the discussion and getting into the topic, I'd like to go to the speakers, maybe starting from Usama, introducing you, what you have been doing, and each of us here to get idea about the background, and then we will have to jump into the discussion. So just to mention that today's panel is co-hosted also by A-Clan Pakistan. So Usama, over to you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it very brief. My name is Usama Tauqeer. I am from Lahore, but I frequent in between two major cities of Pakistan, that is Lahore and Islamabad. I have been associated with almost all the three, you can say, vehicles of any corporate ecosystem, that is the startups, big corporation, and the government-backed corporations, in a way that I started my own startup by the name of A-Clan. A-Clan Pakistan, as we know it, I'm the current managing partner. Plus, I have also been, you can say, associated with this government-backed, first of its kind, pioneer incubator in Pakistan. That's called Plan 9. So I've also seen that side of the table. And then I've also worked with, you can say, a couple of VCs. And currently I represent Facebook Startup Circles. And initially I also represented Facebook Developer Circles. So I also kind of know how the big corporations or startups who have made it big work. So I've sat through all these tables within the ecosystem of Pakistan. That's the major part. Like my colleagues, they actually move abroad, but Pakistan has always suffered from brain drain. So I made it a point that I take a flavor of everything, staying in this country and then see how to go about it. So yeah, we'll discuss this later on in the panel.
That's amazing. That's the resilience I was talking about in the very beginning. Amazing. Thank you so much, Usama. And we will move to Bikash from Nepal. Bikash, would be great if you could share a bit about your background. Yeah.
Namaste, everyone. This is Bikash, President of Robotics Association of Nepal. Robotics Association of Nepal is a not-for-profit non-government organization working in the field of robotics and automation. And from this organization, we promote robotics entrepreneurs, robotics startups, robotics enthusiasts, robotics club, and overall, we form a robotics ecosystem in order to merge together with economics of part of national level works here in Nepal. That's where I'm an executive member of National Innovation Digital Network, which is uh, started by Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, apex body of science and technology innovation here in Nepal. I'm also secretariat coordinator for Nepal AI Conference 2021, and then also executive member organizer for National Innovation Conference 2020. Besides Robotics Association of Nepal, through Robotics Association of Nepal, I had to work with different development agencies, ministries, and all together. So I think for this particular discussion, I would be really bringing together how Nepal's ecosystem works, how entrepreneurial ecosystem is growing, and what Nepal's government is thinking of, where our line is, where we were. So we're really looking forward to exciting panel. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bikash. And we have Vaibhav from India joining us. Vaibhav, please share your thoughts.
Firstly, Shadman, thanks a lot for hosting this panel. Actually, South Asia is one of the unsung areas of the world. It's an area which has been an epicenter of culture of for long of agriculture and now buzzing with technology and startups. So thanks a lot for having this particular panel discussion over here. So about me, I have been an entrepreneur most of my career. I started off in the education space, moved to government tech. So I've worked with a fair share of governments in South Asia. I've also worked quite heavily in the Middle East with the government authorities over there. And working with the governments made me realize how actual social issues are being resolved in all of our countries. And it also made me realize how our ecosystem in terms of technology has been growing, because generally the notion has been that the government is typically 5 to 10 years behind the private sector. So that gave me a lot of perspective. For the past few years, I have jumped ship. I've been working with a lot of VCs, with a lot of startups, and professionally, I also work as an investments banker. Um, I'm really, really excited about the region. I'm really excited about South Asia as a region because now we see that the potential that our people have is the most exciting thing over here. And so, yeah, I'm excited to discuss that with all you guys.
That's amazing. Yeah, exactly. People has been the most exciting and vibrant thing in South Asia, apart from the colorful, cultural, fashion aspect of South Asia. It's music and it's film and TV series as well. So while we have people knowing about all these things coming up from South Asia, the food aspect, the cultural aspect, today we'll be focusing a bit deep into the economic and technology aspect, the entrepreneurship ecosystem of South Asia. And while knowing about that, I believe this short time is not enough to cover the deep information. But then from all the panelists, I'd like to hear a bit about what makes Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem, or what makes Pakistan's ecosystem. So what are the unique things about each of these ecosystems? What are the key sectors where entrepreneurship has been growing? And then later on, I'll have some follow-up question about maybe some of the incidents in the history, some of the policy changes, or some of the needs which have triggered entrepreneurship in the region. So yeah, first question is, how does the entrepreneurship ecosystem look like? And maybe I'll just again start from Vaibhav here, that what makes Indian ecosystem unique and how does it look like?
Sure. So India has been primarily, and I'm talking about India particularly post-independence. So post-independence, it has been primarily an agricultural-driven economy, and technology generally has been slow to move from West to South Asia. But since since the 90s, we opened up, liberalization happened, and slowly the Indian economy was exposed greatly to the technology that existed outside, to the industrial revolution. And that I think was the inflection point in the economy, which opened up all the gates of possibilities for Indian entrepreneurs to look outside and understand what exists outside and bring it to the country. So that I think is one of the most important points in the journey of Indian ecosystem, Indian business ecosystem. Startup was rather an unknown term back then. Um, Moving to the 21st century, essentially what happened was there was more access to capital. So entrepreneurship in India essentially was driven by capital and labor. And access to labor, however abundant it was, there was really low access to capital around the 90s or the early half of 2010s. So as businesses gradually started to grow and there was more and more sort of growth opportunities, a lot of people who had access to this capital started to disburse it, and the overall capital trickle to the middle level or the upper middle level started to increase, and that really was the crucial thing that enabled Indian business ecosystem to sort of um, sort of take that kickstart. In so it was only around 2010 when the Indian startup ecosystem really started to take shape, and I think majorly what happened, what triggered that was a few success stories, the government impetus to cheaper capital, and the abundance of technical knowledge that our people had. I think these three in combination really worked wonders for the Indian startup ecosystem. Cut to now, we are the world's third biggest startup ecosystem. Our policies, particularly you talked about the government policies, so I'm going to shed like a small, I'm going to take a small part of my time and talk about the policies because the Indian government never has been so focused on bringing out the startup ecosystem onto light, onto a global platform. So we recently were also awarded by the United Nations for being one of the best investment opportunities in terms of small and medium enterprises. The government policies for ease of doing business have been improving constantly over the past decade. And access to capital, again, from the point of view of the government, has only been becoming easier. It's been moving not just to tier 1 cities, but also to tier 2, tier 3 cities. Rural entrepreneurship has been boosted a lot. It has been encouraged a lot. And we have every year, we have been adding to the tally of the global unicorns. I guess at the beginning of this year, we had about 26 unicorns in India, and now we have close to 40. So yeah, that's about the Indian startup ecosystem.
That's amazing. So yeah, obviously entrepreneurship, I would say, has been in the blood of South Asia since the very beginning. Maybe the startup word was not there, but then it has been there ever since. And then if I think about the startup ecosystem itself in India, 2010, 2011 was the time when it boosted more than ever before. What triggered is obviously the huge market, a huge opportunity for implementing any sort of idea, but also abundance of technology knowledge, which has been coming from home and also abroad, because a lot of Indian expats been studying and been known around the world for technology knowledge, and distillating all this knowledge into home to come up with a solution. On the other hand, abundance of capital, even to the grassroots level in the second tier or third tier cities, has triggered the growth of India. And now we are seeing a lot of unicorns coming up, a lot of startups which have been Indian grown are going abroad, are scaling up to the other parts of the world. So thank you, Vaibhav, for the idea about the ecosystem and the nature and the size of it. Maybe I'll be moving to Usama about the same question. What makes Pakistan's ecosystem unique? How has been the timeline? What are the key incidents or policies which triggered the growth of the ecosystem? Yeah, over to you, Usama.
Do you want me to talk about the pros only or also the cons?
I'll go to the pros and cons later on. I have a separate question for that. But for now, overall, the picture of the ecosystem itself.
Sure thing, sure thing. So when it comes to the Pakistani ecosystem, and then again, under no some circumstances, let's say I'm in a official capacity to talk uh, about all Pakistanis out there. So I'll simply share my insights, and my insights have always been from a rather patriotic and pragmatic lens instead of ultra nationalism. And that has to do with the fact that most of the folks believe in Pakistan, even in the youth, as of now, it's been fed for quite a while now that politics per se is an evil thing. The word in itself has a negative connotation, right? And reason being, we say, hey, don't politicize this, hey, don't politicize that. But the problem is, the real problem we are facing is the lack of leadership per se, and not only in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but in its entirety. And how it affects the entrepreneurs is that since the beginning, since independence, Pakistan has been the land of abundant resources, from agrarian side to, you can say, mineral and mining oriented sides. We have all the seasons and blah blah. We have all the resources. We have good, smart people. We have passionate people who want to work on pretty much everything which can be commercialized. But the problem is lack of policy. And I've come to realize that no matter how much resourceful you are, no matter how much of a good intent you have, there comes a point that when there would be a tipping point when the policy would eventually break you. And the problem is why I touched the politics bit first and the leadership bit first is that policy eventually is driven by politicians, or let's say the folks who are in the leadership. Now, this lack of, let's say, policy has left Pakistani entrepreneurial ecosystem in a limbo per se. Like most of the amazing talent which I personally know of would rather shoot for any country in the West, or might as well go in the East, instead of working here in Pakistan, because for them, because of the policy, it's a dead end. So although our ecosystem is thriving, it still is.
Soma, your mic has been muted.
Yeah, it said you are muted by the host. I all right. So um, I was saying that at the end of the day, the resources are there and people want to work as well. But despite that, despite these challenges with regards to policy, Pakistani entrepreneurial ecosystem not only has thrived in a small, you can say, amount of time, but it's also exponentially growing. And it primarily has to do with the fact that Pakistan is one of the youngest populations out there in the world right now. Almost, and this is a United Nations report that the trend would continue to grow till 2050. Like, as per the stats, 64% of our, you can say, population is under the age of 30, which can be, you can say, generalized. 23% is between 15 to 29, which is generalized as youth. And we have this huge, you can say, advantage of manpower, and that too young manpower, which is, they have a very paced up learning curve. They can learn new skills. They can exponentially grow with the growing ecosystem. So that is where the numbers, let's say, the resources are even more aligned ever than before. But that is where a need of a concrete policy arises even further. So that makes the ecosystem unique in a way. It's like, let's say, it's a tug of war. It's a tug of war between the progressives and the people who want to stay where they are.
Exactly. Like the old school,
Yeah,
thing
it's
about the policy in one
yeah,
hand, and then you have like 60% of under 30 people who are like enlightened, who know about the world, who are like
Who has
getting
the exposure?
about getting things done. And then there is a clash of, how the policy holds this talent and help them grow. But then
There's a clash of, let's say, generations. There's a clash of mindset. There's a clash of, you can say, approach. Some people want to still live in the Stone Age. And then there are some people who are shooting for the stars. Let's
yeah,
put it this way.
exactly.
Like I see so many people. And the best part, how it's validated is that some of the most major companies out there, unicorns in the world, at the core, there would be Pakistanis. But there would be Pakistanis who left the country as soon as they graduated because they knew that they won't be like their skills won't be better utilized over here.
Yeah, yeah.
Then there are some who are returning back.
Exactly. That's the thing. I was almost having one of the questions about, but then that's the all about the expats, and we often complain about brain drain in South Asia. But then, wherever we go, I'm pretty sure all of you have witnessed that wherever you go, there will see South Asian leadership, whether it be from India or Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. They are there. How do they go there? Maybe because the situation and the ecosystem has given them the scopes. But how do we have that at home so that it grows? Things like that. So I'll have some questions about that later on. But then, Usama, would you give us a brief idea about during which time the startup thing has been a thing in Pakistan? Since when it has been, a lot of VCs came in, a lot of incubators, accelerators started growing up in the ecosystem. Since when the youth have been coming into the startup culture in Pakistan?
I would say 2012 or let's say 2011 can be considered like a tipping point. That is, there was no real concept of incubator, a tech incubator in Pakistan. That is when the government stepped in. There were some micro incubators working in silos. That is when, and this is the policy change I'm talking about. In like essentially speaking, the Pakistani entrepreneurial ecosystem is only 8 years old and it's already doing wonders across the globe. So I still remember I went to Nurse Islamabad, one of the most prestigious tech institutes of Pakistan in 2011. By 2011, there was like entrepreneurship was just a buzzword. There were some folks who were doing these societies within a university that is Nurse Entrepreneurs Club. I myself was a part of it. We didn't even know the first thing about entrepreneurship or startups back then. But that is when in 2012, because of the government change, there was a government change, there was a bureaucratic or aristocratic change in the government. And that is when some folks who had the exposure from abroad, they had run their own startups. And then they really knew how this ecosystem works. They stepped into the government. So technically speaking, they stepped into politics. The very word which is demonized for the educated masses that, hey, don't go near politics. As soon as they kind of came into this political ecosystem, the first thing they did was they realized that for Pakistani ecosystem to thrive, we have to make some of its industries even better. And tech was an essential investment because its barrier to entry or its initial capital required is very less. All you need is a good internet connection, good office space, and that is it. You can make an entire industry out of it because our textile industry was dying, all other industry, our mainstream industry was dying because of these constant policy changes. There was this nationalization of these bigger companies, and then there was this you can say privatization, and then again nationalization. So most of the folks, they simply fled the country and they started new from somewhere else. So in 2012 there was this new concept of a zero equity government backed incubator, which simply said that, hey, if you are a young professional in any of the country, in any of the universities, or you are simply skilled enough, you have a degree on you, you can come to us. That is the government. We'll help you set up your own startup. We'll pay you, like we'll give you the seed money, we'll give you the office space, we'll give you the network, we'll give you whatever you want. And in return, we are not taking anything from you. So what they were trying to do was they were encouraging the younger lot or the newer lot that instead of going for the job sector, might as well focus on the entrepreneurial sector and create jobs. And that too was a policy level change, because Pakistani policymakers soon realized that with our growing young population, the employment scene is not strong enough that it would be able to provide, you can say, jobs to pretty much everyone. That really took off, and that is when the first real wave of entrepreneurs came into existence, and that started in Lahore. That's why Lahore is the most vibrant of the three major cities in Pakistan when it comes to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that too was initiated by Punjab government.
I
After
see.
its success, we had a localized version of Spotify, that was Patari. Then we had a localized version of BuzzFeed, that was Mango Bars. Then a localized version of Kareem, Uber, that was Travely, Savari. There were some startups which really led the way. And by 2013, 15, it was doing pretty well. That is when I graduated as well. But that is when the VC culture was lacking. So the startups had started working, but in order to scale, because these are economies of scale, they wanted some VC money on them. And that is when the government again stepped in. There was an accelerator which was created. There was a public-private partnership oriented fund which was encouraged. Some investors, some VC conglomerates were encouraged that, hey, if you invest in startups, we are giving you 3 years of leeway in terms of taxes. And then there were some major policy level changes which were brought into action to support this ecosystem. And as it stands, our startup know-how, our entrepreneurial know-how with regards to, matter of fact, is our main offices are in a very major co-working space as of now. It's an amazing space which is increasing day by day. Just imagine they have a wait of 4 to 5 months. It's called Daftar Khan. They have a wait of 4 to 5 months just to get one seat. And they have like almost 6 to 7 locations as of now, and then in different cities. It's because people actually are diving into this ecosystem now. Now, if you talk to someone in the university, instead of saying the age-old reply that I want to work for a reputed organization, they would say we want to start our own thing. Exactly. The only thing which is really lacking is the outside VC money, because now even local VC money is available as well. If you're good enough, we have seen some very major rounds being raised by some major startups like Airlift, $20 million initial rounds in itself in terms of Series A or Series B, and they were major rounds. And not only this, but the Western VCs are also eyeing Pakistan because of its. So what makes it unique is that there are so many opportunities for the VCs and investors out there, because Pakistan primarily has a very major chunk of middle income socioeconomic class. So our cash inflows, our consumer markets are amazing. Like, they're insane. If you have a good consumer-oriented day-to-day commodity service or a product, you can make a lot of money. And then there's this another edge of population. Then there's this another edge of a young population. So for instance, if you really have something which can appeal to the young masses, you can make sure that you don't even need Series B or C or D. You might as well just bootstrap, because you'll be making good money. So exactly. That's why, and so to answer your question, I'm sorry I went a bit overboard, but I wanted to give you a gist of what really happened, because at the end of the day, I also always tell that exposure is the key, and there are times when we are seeing something from our perspective. So for instance, if I would have simply said that it took off in 2012, then it would have meant like there was someone who came in and then all of a sudden 2012 it's all on. But it was a constant struggle.
Yeah, please go.
Still is. There are these roundtable conferences. The best part is now the government involves the private sector folks, at least the entrepreneurs. Like now there is no prerequisite of you having gray hair to have a say in the government. Like I was actually working with them. So otherwise, if we were talking, let's say a decade back, they would have said, hey, you don't know anything. You are young enough. You don't know how this thing works.
So this change is really important if we talk about the very first point you mentioned, which is lack of policy, which means involving these young people into the
Yes.
system would really help.
Very
So thanks, Usama, for the detailed sharing of the ecosystem. I will have some follow-up question to both of you and Vaibhav as well. A lot of questions actually. But before that, I'll go to Bikash about the Nepalese ecosystem and sharing about the timeline, what are the needs and what are the incidents which triggered the ecosystem there, since when it has been becoming a widespread thing and so on. Bikash, over to you.
Yep, it's really actually interesting to hear from Vaibhav and Osama how Indian ecosystem and Pakistani ecosystem too. I think Pakistani ecosystem and Nepalese ecosystem almost had a same timeline. Though from my point of view, I can see the unicorns, the startup which has really grown into businesses. At the moment where started in 2005 to 2010 timeline where they really grew up, but the follow-up was really good when there were a lot of those startup which started after 2010, and that's how the scene of a whole country changed, like from the traditional way of doing business to elaborating on a startup ecosystem, completely changed the country's mindset and country's ecosystem. And if we talk about what are the unique things that shows in Nepal's ecosystem are people and problems, performance, and perseverance. People, because there are like lots of people who are really hungry to be successful. Nepalese has faced a lot of challenges in their life of time, and young people who had just grown up in their 30s, 40s has faced Maoist insurgents, blockades, earthquake, and a lot of those problems that had challenged the life. And in those hard times, Nepalese had made a mindset that they would grow into a successful way or successful stage when they have the opportunity. And now in this stage, Nepalese are slowly seeing, okay, we have the opportunity to grow by ourselves. And as Usama also mentioned, how Pakistani governance or policy ecosystem actually suffered the startup ecosystem. There is a pull and drag between the old mindset and new mindset. I think that used to exist in Nepal as well, but now the government is also on a progressive side. The people's mindsets are also in the progressive side, so that makes a really unique for all the Nepalese startup ecosystem. And I think one of the unique thing is there is a lot of challenges here in Nepal. We say Nepal ma samasya nahi samasya cha, which means like there is lot of problems. And this really relates, if there is a problem, there's also the opportunity, and people are seeing there's a opportunity to grow, there's an opportunity to do business, there's an opportunity to grow the country by itself. Nepal used to be ruled by monarchy, and after 2062-63 movement, revolutionary movement, Nepal got its public democracy, and it's now a republic country. In this timeline, what had happened is people got the power to itself, and that also made people to believe that they could change the whole country's system by their own. Though there's a lot of challenges still exists in the country, but still that I think is one of the unique thing about Nepalese ecosystem. Performance, Nepalese ecosystem has really adapted to the global technologies, global qualities, global knowledges, and they have reflected in their solutions, their product, their services. So the performance has been really good, and that's where the local public is also consuming the local solutions, and government is also consuming the local solutions. So that also open up the ways for the Nepalese ecosystems, startup ecosystems to grow. And perseverance is the last thing I want to highlight, because as I said, like Nepalese has suffered a lot of difficult times, but still Nepalese business ecosystem has thrived even during those times. In this, even during this COVID-19, I have seen a lot of business startups have suffered a lot, but still they are not saying, "Hey, we are going to get out of the business. We are not going to take our startup in the next long run. We are going to get a job and get rid of this problematic business challenge." They are just going on. Let's face this. Let's see what lies ahead, because we know after this challenge is over, there's the opportunity. That's where we have been working for so far. So these are the unique things I think Nepal's ecosystem has. And last but not the least, these all unique things make a Nepalese market a growing market, because all these Nepalese ecosystem, startup ecosystem has grown into the capital city of Kathmandu. And this has not been completely reflected in other cities and other growing cities. So these growing cities are learning from Kathmandu and adapting to their cities. So that shows that there's a whole lot of opportunity to grow, and the mindset of people in each of the region has also the same, like to grow and to maximize their wealth and to be successful. So I think that's how this whole reflection sum up how Nepalese ecosystem looks like.
Thank you so much, Bikash. Thanks for the sharing. So I'll move to Vaibhav about a couple of questions that obviously we talked a bit about the entire India's ecosystem, but then I have a couple of questions. Is that, you know, in our last discussion we had before the panel, you mentioned about some of the unique models and some of the unique stories from both public and private sector in India, which has triggered entrepreneurship overall. So would be great if you could share about some of the success stories, some of the unique models which really work to trigger entrepreneurship, maybe from the public and from the private sector, and a bit about the cities, because in Good City Foundation, we believe that, you know, the country is a combination of units of cities, and we'd love to know more about some of the most vibrant cities where the startup culture has been the most vibrant overall in India. Vaibhav, over to you.
Sure. So talking about talking about the unique incidents that have happened both publicly and privately for the Indian startup ecosystem. Like I mentioned before, 1991 was one big year for the whole country, which exposed a lot of our people to technology and business models that was sitting out there in the West. That was one inflection point. That was one tipping point for um, entrepreneurs and businessmen sitting here in India to try and explore global markets. Because of the bilateral trade agreements that existed back then, India could actually start trading with other economies. And business was usually commoditized back then. And for that reason, it was more so an exchange of commodities, of products, than an exchange of ideas or software. And because of that, what happened was we got a lot of exposure, not just in terms of products, but also in terms of practices that existed out there in the West. We got exposed to the kind of quality checks that were there in place once we imported a lot of goods from the US, from Brazil. And that essentially made us realize that the kind of products that we can bring in, we can produce them in our country as well because we have all the required resources. And that essentially gave a lot of impetus for businessmen to set up manufacturing units inside the country. We were a young country. We faced independence. We were sort of plundered for years and years, and the whole economy was just starting to shape up. That was sort of one incident which triggered everything. The second really interesting model, which I really like to talk about, is the role of governments in setting up what we call the Atal Innovation Mission. And over here, what I would like to do is bring in the city aspect that you talked about. So what the government did was through two nationwide mission. One was the Atal Innovation Mission. The second was the Smart Cities Mission. Through the Atal Innovation Mission, the government essentially recognized that it was the young people who could really afford to take risks, who could stick their heads out and say that, hey, I'm accountable for what I do, and I am responsible for building a business. And for that reason, the government really started to focus on the young people. Like Osama mentioned, the whole of South Asia is a very, very young economy. It's a very young set of people, and it's rather really important for us to understand the most important thing over here is aligning with the youth, aligning with the youth not only in terms of what they want, but what is good for them. So that was one thing I think really changed the face of business in India. So through the Atal Innovation Mission, what the government did was it recognized institutions of importance, and these were not just technical education institutions; these were also institutions of business. These were also institutions which taught some some real life skills. So to say, if a student who is not an engineer but is studying philosophy has a really good idea, he also should have access to build out something with the support of the government. So that was the basic idea that the government had. So we started off with about 100 institutions to sort of pilot it out, and cities weren't really a constraint back then. So if the institution really had a good sort of outlook to fostering entrepreneurship within their sort of campus, the government was very open to set up an incubator over there. So like Osama mentioned, incubators really play a very, very important role, especially for first-time founders. And since the South Asian startup ecosystem only started off in the 21st century, it is safe to assume that almost 90% of the founders were first-time founders. So it was really important for them to understand where they're headed. Is it the right direction? And incubators play a really important role for them to to sort of help them out, help them figure it out, right? So through the mission, it was a really successful mission. It got scaled up, and now it covers more than 500 institutions of importance. Through the mission, the government also set up a fund of funds. Again, ties back to my point of capital access. They also set up a smart cities mission to sort of make sure that all these startups that come through the Atal Innovation Mission also ensure that the cities, the major cities in India. So India has a few major cities, and they are known for certain things. So for example, New Delhi is the capital of the country. Bombay is Mumbai. It's known as the financial capital of the country, and Bangalore is known as the tech capital of the country. And this term has only been coined post the surge of startups in the region. So almost anyone who knows about the Indian startup scene knows about Bangalore as the most buzzing place. And from that, there's this joke that runs around. So if you go to any Starbucks in Bangalore, you will find some entrepreneur pitching his or her idea to some investor. So that's the sort of density that we have in Bangalore, and it's really amazing. So through the Smart Cities mission, government sought to connect these two ideas and make sure that whatever startups are there, they also help improve the standard of living, the quality of life within these cities. And through the Smart Cities mission, it's not just the major cities that I'm talking about, it's also about the tier 2, tier 3 cities. We started off with the major cities because the problems were easier to identify, easier to solve. People were more receptive to technology over there, but slowly it started trickling down to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. That was the major idea. The government recently also set up, so this is sort of another major breakthrough that the government achieved. through policy and through setting up an open dialogue between the public and the private sector. Again, even the Indian bureaucracy was such that nobody like us could even talk to these people and tell them the problems that we face. Right? It was built like that. But the government really opened up. They started hearing out the issues, the problems that the young founders were facing. They really wanted to come up with a solution, and for a lot of people, the major issue was testing out the markets. So the government saw that getting that initial traction, getting that initial validation was the biggest issue any entrepreneur could face, because the market, and this is back in 2010 or 11, when the whole scene hadn't really taken off. There were some successes. There were some successes like Flipkart, Snapdeal, and all these companies. Ola was also starting off, but it hadn't really taken off per se. So what the government did was it became a customer for a lot of such startups. So it said that, okay, we understand that you cannot really go out without having any VC money or any sort of money and test out the markets. What we'll do is we will enable you to test out markets with our own resources or our money. And this happened in a phase-wise manner, where government set up a portal which is called the government's e-marketplace, where it actually enabled a lot of state level authorities, city level authorities, municipal level authorities to actually buy products, buy software, buy services from startups. And there were essentially, this really, what it did was it really broke down that bureaucracy. It really broke down that red tapeism within the government, which said that which always used to. So if you see any government in India, it always had all the softwares that it used, all these were really from big software giants like Wipro or the Tatas, or Infosys for that matter. There's nothing wrong with that, but there were certain really amazing tools that the startups had to offer to the governments, which the government was very receptive to. And I, for one, can vouch for that, because I have been a part of that government e-marketplace. I have sold products to the Indian government, and so I can sort of vouch for that whole policy. And I think that really sort of shifted mindsets inside the government to enable entrepreneurship. Another incident that I would like to talk about, the private industry, is the enablement that happened on the VC side. So, I mean, it's a game of demand and supply. If the startups are in abundance but the VC money is not, it's not really going to sustain, because it's not like a typical business. It's a innovative product, and it requires high growth. For high growth, for a lot of industries, I mean, I'm not generalizing, but for a lot of industries, I mean, if you're in disruptive e-commerce, without that extra cash, you will eventually burn out and you'll be dead. So you do need VC money for a lot of businesses to actually survive and thrive. And without having VC money, these businesses could not sustain. And so privately, what really helped the private sector to enable that capital trickle down to the startups was partnerships with global VC funds. And then again, when I talk about global investments, when I talk about FDIs, government policy again comes into the picture, because it's like the last stone that you have to kick before you actually can move on. And that those global partnerships essentially really helped Indian VCs gain access to foreign fund of funds. So essentially what happened is a lot of fund managers came up. They said that so we cannot raise money as funds. We cannot raise money from Indian pension funds or Indian hedge funds, because they really want little exposure to startups. But what we can do is maybe we could get FDI inflows from foreign countries where hedge fund managers are more sort of risk taking, so to say. again, this is a long time back, so things have changed a lot. But I'm particularly talking about how they all came into place. So these fund managers went about and they said, okay, we really want to raise funds and invest in Indian startups. So can we enable an FDI to the fund itself? So they did some partnerships with foreign pension funds, foreign hedge funds. They enabled these inflows, and that really sort of trickled down and enabled these startups to create some success stories. And what really happens is, if in any particular industry, if I see as a VC, that is how our mentality is. Some VCs are risk taking, some are not. Out of the 10 startups we know, 8 will fail, and we still bet on them. But how it all operates inside our minds is, we really want to see one success story, or at least some startup in a similar space or in a similar industry doing particularly well. That is sort of a validation for a lot of VCs in India. And this this trickle down of capital really enabled the first few startups in a lot of industries to show that success. And that really also enabled then the Indian VCs, Indian funds, to realize that yes, there is potential and it has been proven. So that, I think, these few incidents, I think, really sort of kick-started or pushed the scene forward.
That's amazing. That's a very detailed background. I have been noting some very interesting information and the initiative by the government, which I'd really love to study more about. So I'll move to Usama. Now, Usama was just mentioning that, not just today, also a couple of days back, that there have been some initiatives from the government aspect, which helped some of the models which helped the ecosystem in Pakistan. The ecosystem build up, or the startup movement kind of started from Lahore, and there have been some good initiatives from the government of Punjab as well. So overall, Usama, if you could give an idea about some of the most vibrant startup cultures in Pakistan, which are the cities, and what are the stories or some of the models by the government which really help the growth of the ecosystem?
All right. So the reason why I say Lahore, although like people would think I'm biased, but most of my university life or professional life was spent in Islamabad. The reason why I say Lahore is because of the advent of this software technology park, which was backed by the government first. Second, this incubator I mentioned, this zero equity incubator. And then there was this co-working space, which was brought in by the government. And then there was this, you can say, accelerator, which was brought in by the government. But all in all, it was technically Punjab Information Technology Board, which was the driving force. And so to put things in perspective, there's this federal government, and then there is the provincial government. And Lahore happens to be the capital of Punjab. And Punjab Information Technology Board has been the only board which has actually done justice to their mandate. So that's why, like, we can safely assume that, okay, it was Lahore which was kind of driving this, but it was because PITB in a way was headquartered in that. So what happened was, with the advent of this one model, it took off really well. And when it took off really well, that is when the federal government intervened, and then they realized that, okay, this model is good enough. So they decided to extrapolate and magnify this model at a federal scale. That is when the advent of national incubation centers came along. And those centers was because, again, they had a mandate for the entire Pakistan. That was not only in Lahore, then it was in all the major cities. And to gain the snowball effect, government realized that the only people who are actually receptive to this entire thing are the young population, or you can say the youth per se, that too have been exposed to good academic institutions. So they decided that they would rather focus on universities and all. And that is when there was this new model was brought in, that was Oryx. So Oryx was, they made it a part of a policy that every accredited university needs to, like, they have to have a mini incubator of the sorts within their university, and they have to support their university aspiring entrepreneurs, like their students, which are specific. So for instance, let's say there's this federal level ecosystem, and then there is this hyper local ecosystem within the university that, all right, so I am in NUST, I'm an Nustian, and then there's someone in LUMS. Both of these universities would have their own ORICs. And those ORICs are then further connected with the government if needed, or with the VCs, or they can, so there can be public-private partnerships, they can be public partnerships in itself, and blah, blah. So that is where the, let's say, resources were aligned. And then one of the most, you can say, pivotal things, I along with a couple of other entrepreneurial entities are of this opinion that one of the most, the biggest enabler in our entrepreneurial ecosystem was this advent of internet connectivity at very lesser and cheaper rates. As soon as the government focused on the telecom industry, that the telecom industry needs to thrive, they were given subsidies at times, they were given a couple of, you can say, brute force agreements. That is when the real change happened, because this one internet connectivity issue instantly connected, let's say, a very far off rural area in Punjab with the main center. And so that was when the real change happened. And that is when the telecom sector upped their game as well. And they became a partner of this entrepreneurial ecosystem. So they started making products and services for a rather tech-enabled organization. So for instance, so just imagine, it only took a year or two. I've yet to meet someone who now uses a SIM or a telecom connection in its traditional or conventional manner. Even the calls are on WhatsApp, even the messages are on WhatsApp or any other VoIP service. They don't do calls anymore. The packages which were used to offer that, hey, you can call from your phone to your phone or Telenor to Telenor for these many minutes, they're redundant, because all people care about is data. And I've traveled enough, and I host people from across the globe as well. I've yet to see cheaper in data rates than Pakistan anywhere in the world. So I've been exposed to 26 countries so far. The rates are phenomenal, like they're insane. So for instance, in, let's say, my package, for instance, would be in like $2 you get 13 GB for a month. And that's more than sufficient for mobile alone. And then there are, you can say, for the, this sector has been subsidized in a way that the tech sector has really been pivotal in acceptance of technologies and startups across board. And this generally is still a bit nascent. We cannot say it has this entire movement or this entire effect has matured already, or there is a need for innovation. All we need to do is we need to realign our resources even better. We need to realign our policy even better. We need to let the policy do its work. There should be no politicization of the entire thing. So for instance, if a new government comes in, they kind of, let's say, it's a habit, it's an old habit. They slash in the previous mandate just to showcase that, hey, we are bringing in something new because we are a new government. But if something is working, if something is clearly working, why break the wheel? Like, in fact, you should rather focus on the wheel in itself to make it even more optimized. And this movement, I'm saying it movement because this would not have been possible without the, you can say, selfless contribution of many young entrepreneurs out there. They do this out of no, you can say, commercial aspect. So including myself, like I offer my pro bono services at times. I offer my time at times to these conferences, to these discussions. The same time which has a huge opportunity cost, I would have gone somewhere else and then made some more money. And then there are so many believers who believe that there's this onus of responsibility on them that they need to bring the Pakistani ecosystem on par with the global ecosystem because we have the numbers. Like, here's the thing, if we did have the numbers, then this whole, you can say, drill or struggle would have been fruitless regardless. But we know for a fact we have the numbers. And why? And this is where this is a very interesting phenomena. Why we are even more relevant, let's say our generation, it's because our generation in an actual manner is the transitional generation. We have actually seen the world working in total offline isolation. We have seen the ecosystems work uh, pre-internet, and we have seen the ecosystem works post-internet. Even the generation which is preceding us hasn't really seen that kind of a change, and then the successive generations would not see that change as well, because they would never know what the world would look like without internet. So that's where the onus of responsibility comes in, that we understand both sides of the table. We understand that, hey, there's this new consumer market who cannot survive without the internet. So you have to make the models or the cities as per. Just imagine, like there's this clear cut divide in the rural areas. You'll see a generation who doesn't understand internet at all. The upper generation, I'm talking about the rural areas, because that is where the divide is a bit, you can say, extrapolated. And then there's this younger generation who know the inside out of how internet works, and they're already exposed to a global economy. They know what, let's say, a student or an artist is aspiring in Europe or US, whereas their upper generation only knew what is happening at a hyper local scale in a village or something of that sort. They only had that vision and perspective. And that is where we need to bring in some technologies or bring in some solutions which are empathizing with both the sides, so the communication is smoothened and transition. And there have been many, you can say, drills which I've been a part of, which were properly addressing this one issue in itself, that was the communication or a smooth transition of technology to both these sides. And the successive side also needs to understand how the offline world works, because no matter how much we say, a major portion of Pakistan is still offline. So we still need to cater to them. We cannot simply focus on Lahore in itself, working in silos, because we cannot simply say that, hey, we are a bigger city, so if you want to have a better life, move to the bigger city. Instead, we should go out in the smaller cities in itself with these solutions, which are as viable for a smart city as viable for a, let's say, I would not say backward city, but I would say a city who is yet to be on par with the smart city model, right? So the government is doing its bit rather slowly, but that's how governments work. The private ecosystem is doing its bit rather, let's say, strongly and dedicatedly. But I also always make it a point in panel discussions like these, because it's not only a Pakistani problem, it's also a South Asian problem. At times, you have to become a bit selfless, because brain drain, at the end of the day, the core of brain drain is selfish. It's a rather, I won't say selfish really, it's a very strong word, but it's a rather selfish approach of let's say, calling your country out, and without, you can say, contributing towards it, and then going somewhere abroad doing the same thing, and then um, talking, let's say, I won't use the curse word, about the hometown. Like, you never really contributed towards that, so who gives you the onus, or who gives you the platform to, like, uh, talk on something which you never really actively contributed on? And then there are some people who think that going abroad is actually helping the country. Yes, it does, if you are doing your consumerism within the hometown. If you're sending in money back, like that is where the labor class comes in. Like, I have this very strong opinion of most of my educated colleagues as well, that who say that, hey, going abroad is a good thing because we are bringing in money. But the thing is, the actual money is brought in by the labor force, which generally goes to UAE, countries like Middle East, where they don't spend a single dime. They make sure that they send the money back home. That still is a progressive approach rather than you go stay somewhere and then you spend all your money on parties and all. Well, I do the same thing, but that is the money earned and then spent somewhere else for a short period of time instead of earning some money somewhere and then spending it over there and then saying that, hey, Pakistan is a backward country, we cannot really do anything about it, so let's just be it this way.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Like, I really like what you mentioned, that this generation is actually the properly supported first generation after, say, India became India and then Pakistan and Bangladesh and so on, the transition. So this generation knows how, the world works. They know why it's important to collaborate. They know how the offline and the digital world works and things like that. And that also brings me to this point that, okay, South Asian problems are very South Asian problems, and it has to be solved by the South Asians. So it doesn't matter if you are trying to solve a problem in India or Pakistan, and then you bring in experts from any other part of the world who don't know. Maybe they don't know the technique, but South Asia is a lot beyond technique. It has a lot of cultural aspect to it, political aspect to it, and whatnot. So that would bring me to one question, like last two questions I would have, which is about the role of the expats and bringing in the, say, expatriates to, so that they can contribute to the home, rather than going abroad and feeling like they're left behind, they're not being able to contribute to the economy and so on. So before that, I will just sum up that, the reason why kind of the movement started from that part of Pakistan has been about the establishment of software tech parks, the zero equity capital support from the government, abundance of co-working spaces, accelerators where PITB has played a major role. And apart from that, the good academic institutes and the establishments of OREX, which is, university-based incubator, and connecting it to the main system to support entrepreneurship, that has supported. And obviously, not to mention that the cheap internet support all across Pakistan has triggered the growth. So I'll go to Bikash. We're almost running out of time, but then I'll try to keep it crisp and short. That Bikash, that would be great if you could share a bit about some of the models and stories which really help the growth of Nepalese ecosystem. I'm very aware that you have been working in both public and private sector. You have collaborated with the government to establish some of your works, and the Robotic Association of Nepal, or RAN, has been playing a major role to introduce the makers industry or maker industry related startups in the country. So what are the things which really help Nepal in terms of the models from the public or private sector, just like we learned about the Pakistan and India aspects? So Bikash, what would be your sharing on that?
In terms of Nepalese growth in the startup ecosystem, I think it's the effort of private sector that helped Nepal grow a lot. Uh, Nepalese private sector has been really proactive in terms of growing itself with the global range. Nepalese ecosystem has always looked after what's happening in the other side of the world rather than only in the country. And they have tried to adapt to it and also make a supply line chain so that they could facilitate the Nepalese with the global there, and also make it available for the Nepalese. So I think the private sector has played a huge role, but there is also one challenge that exists in this time. The private sectors that came to pick Nepalese ecosystem forward are more from a middle class family. Like, they struggled a lot. They invested their lands, their buildings. They sold them and they started those businesses. They had loans for a lot of time before they get the success. So uh, middle class families, they struggled, but what about the people who already had money? What about those venture capitalists who already has billions? I think they never saw the potential in this startup ecosystem at first. They didn't believe on how technology could possibly change the Nepalese system, and also they could be part of it. They could adapt to it, and that's where we can see the growth of the startup here in Nepal in a slow pace, not on a very scaled pace. It took a lot of time for the businesses that has grown in Nepal because of the lack of funds. They have to generate the funds by themselves. They have to get the funds from their friends, as I said, like by selling their properties, and that's how they grew up. But Nepalese government transition also helped them a lot. In terms of policies, there were not sufficient environment for this entrepreneur to grow, but still, Nepalese politics were never into this startup ecosystem. They didn't saw how it was growing to grow. They were growing on a natural. Nepalese government were not seeing it. There were no policies or rules or regulations that could actually stop them to grow them by themselves. So they were also forming the policies by themselves. They were going to the government and saying, hey, we need this policy for this startup ecosystem to thrive. And that's how Nepalese policies also built around. So you can see these middle class family people actually change the whole ecosystem here in Nepal. And if we see all the sectors like the 8 pillars, that is the part of the digital Nepal framework that is formed by Nepal government: agriculture, health, education, energy, tourism, finance, urban infrastructures, digital foundations. This is dominated by middle class entrepreneurs, SMEs, and that has supported a lot. Where are the big private sector investors? They are more into the energy sectors. They are more into the big urban infrastructures development. But in terms of growth of the low scale infrastructures, these middle class entrepreneurs has helped a lot. And Nepal also interest to be on a same side with India and China has also helped a lot in terms of shaping its economy. Though there were lots of political transition that I mentioned, Nepal actually had a 6.5% growth rate in 2017, 6.7% growth rate, GDP growth rate in 2018. Even during this pandemic, it has a positive growth rate, 1.2%. So Nepal's government's also mindset on growing in this startup ecosystem and digital ecosystem has helped us a lot in terms of growing the startup. And though there has been a technological growth in the other side of the world, though it might have taken us 5 to 10 years to adapt, we have seen those adaptation. When we see internet penetration here in Nepal, it's almost more than 70%, which is good because the transition, as I said, after the 60 to 63 year, like in Nepal's term, the 15 years of time, the 70% internet penetration is really good, and there's 100% of mobile users. Like there's a 250 users growing in a second in Nepal. So that shows how the growth is growing here in Nepal. I think this has helped us a lot, and there has been a let's say patriotism possibly. people want to build Nepal by themselves, and there has been themes like "Afno gaon, afai banao," "Afno sahar, afai banao." So these taglines has helped in terms of growing even Nepal in difficult times. So this has helped us Nepal in startup ecosystem as well. And Nepalese has also stand out in global stages, and you can see that there has been lots of awards Nepalese has gained in these times. So though there was no such opportunities, now Nepalese are getting its recognition all around the world, and that's where Nepalese ecosystem is growing. If I have to see the future from now, the startups that is now based in Kathmandu will grow all over the Nepal, and Nepal also actually halted its metropolitan system for 15 years, and for this 5 years, this metropolitan systems, mayor systems has thrived a lot. And in these 5 years, we have seen the change, and this will go for a long time because Nepalese are really happy with the new system that has come. Though corruption is there, but still there's a positive sign that Nepalese startup system will grow. So, if I have to see Nepalese startup ecosystem where in terms of its growth, I definitely see a positive aspect, and Nepal definitely has a capacity to grow despite of the challenges.
Amazing. Yeah, I really like one point you mentioned, which is the role of SMEs, the middle class population in South Asia. And that's, I believe, pretty much the same for all the South Asian countries, is that, as we just saw, that it has been like 2009, 10 or 11 when the startup thing, all this thing came in. But the economy has always been, and even today, driven by that small businesses in the villages of, say, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal, who are doing like small selling small products, and that's the main force of economy. And the transition to startup and all these cool stuffs we talk about, that's relatively new, and that's when I believe the public sector is also struggling to understand the importance of this, why these young people are coming up with new ideas, disruptive ideas, and changing the whole thing. So I believe this transition is very shaky, and as this generation, we have been going through the whole thing. It's quite a struggle. But then I believe, that's a good time for the expats, say all these Pakistanis, Indians, Bangladeshis, Nepalis living abroad, to come back. And I'm pretty sure I have seen this trend in the last few years that a lot of, say, American Indians or British Pakistanis or Bangladeshi Americans are coming back, investing in businesses, bringing that knowledge they had in the Silicon Valley, in Waterloo, or wherever they worked in, and implementing it. And that also means that this generation is open for collaboration within the borders and within the region, which means, South Asia has also been known in the media for a couple of conflicts, hatred within the nations for whatsoever. But then we all know that it's also a very much political issue. More than anything, or the media has always shown a different picture, which is maybe 1-2% of the whole story. But then we all know that when we meet abroad, the South Asian automatically blend in over food, over music, and we chill out together. And that's where all the people unite, right? And us as this generation, I believe it's our role to facilitate this transition of ideas. Why not a Pakistan-based solution easily land in India, India-based solution in Nepal, Nepal-based solution in Bangladesh? So that's a future we'll be looking forward to. And while ending it, I believe it was an interesting point mentioned by Vaibhav a couple of days back, that let's end with a point which is how to land in India, or how to land in Pakistan, how to land in Nepal. If a startup, say, from one of these countries or any of these countries want to land in Nepal or in India, what are the steps? Who are the people they should be going to? Who are the bodies they should be going to? So I believe we're almost at the end of the discussion. So I'll have this question, maybe starting from Vaibhav, that if someone wants to land in India, what are the steps? Who they should go to apart from you, and how should the steps looking
Sure,
like? Yeah.
sure. So I think for any startup, especially, so I'm going to talk about the Southeast Asian ecosystem, and if any startup from any other country wants to enter into the Indian market, and especially a lot of startups have shown interest because it's a huge market. The whole South Asian market, it's a huge market. It's a diverse market. We have different sets of people, so even a small niche segment can make you a unicorn. And that's essentially the idea why there are so many startups within one industry, within one sector. So the idea is pretty simple. The first and the foremost thing I would recommend is, if any startup wants to enter into a market, the first thing that they want to do is to study the market. And I think there is no better place to understand a market than forums like these, and people like us, right? So I remember Usama talking about this earlier in our calls, that he would be more than happy to help anyone who would want to expand into Pakistan, to help them understand the local culture over here, because localization is the biggest power and the biggest challenge at the same time. So I think the first step where anybody wants to understand the real markets is it's to come out in these forums, on these platforms, connect with people, with individuals, rather than connecting with organizations, and trying and understanding how their product fits the market. That is sort of the first step. Post that, if they really want to sort of enter into any market, I would suggest it's really good to look at a startup doing something similar in the same country, and to try and understand how they can complement and work together. I think that's a good starting point. And for that, we have regional organizations that actually help international startups do this. So NASSCOM, the National Association for Software and Service Companies, it's a non-profit organization. It's backed by the government. They actually run programs for countries across Asia to do these startup exchanges, so to call. So within these exchanges, what happens is some startups from country X, some startups from country Y, they try and explore each other's cultures, explore each other's markets, then actually try and figure out if they can find a somewhat similar or sort of a company which does closely similar to them, and try and partner with them, try and help them complement and improve on their services. So I think that's really a good starting point. In terms of if a company has a very mature product and wants to enter into the country, I would recommend going the government route then, because a government is very open and receptive to receiving companies selling products in India. I would not comment upon the ongoing trade war and everything, but otherwise the whole nation has been very receptive to products from across the world. So yeah, that's about it.
Exactly. Like that's one thing we could, talk for hours, which is about, the power of nationalism, but also how some of the emotions are also, driven in a different way, which has also been
Yeah.
that thing for this region. Thank you so much, Vaibhav, for the summary. Maybe I'll go to Bikash. So if we want to come to Nepal, enjoy some momo, and land a startup there, what should be the step?
Uh, I think if you want to enjoy the momo, you can go into the streets of Kathmandu and find some Everest momo and Boso-right momos. They are really tasty, and they are cheap. You will have a stomach full with one plate, but you can add. And if you want to fulfill your hunger to invest in Nepal, to start your startup and expand it, there are like lots of organizations that is supporting foreigners as well as national startups. I think the first place to go would be MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. they definitely have a set of rules and regulations that we have to follow as a foreign startups or investors. And the next would be Nepal's ecosystem players. There are like lots of ecosystem entrepreneurial ecosystem players that is a supporting hand for any foreign investor to come on, for such as Patao, there's a Ola, and there's a uh, hotel chain. What was that? I forgot the Indian hotel chain that came in because of this entrepreneurial ecosystem to come in Nepal and expand their brands, such as and they were held by Clockbee Innovations, King's College, Nepal Entrepreneurs Hub. If you want to start on a digital side, you should definitely visit Nepal Telecommunication Authority. They have the details of the registered business in terms of IT, and they could say you the details like where you have your potential gap to fulfill, and you could expand. And then you could also visit Nepal Tourism Board. If you are coming here for in tourism side, they definitely helped a lot. There has been a lot of international investor that has come in Nepal and invest in tourism businesses. If you want to go on a medical side, that could be Ministry of Health and Population and Nepal Health Research Council. They has been helping medical entrepreneurs to come in Nepal and bring in their different medicines and supplies here in Nepal. If you want to think on infrastructure side, you can definitely visit Kathmandu Metropolitan City and the City Planning Commissions, because they are a hub for all the metropolitan cities leaders, and City Planning Commission is coordinates with all the planning commissions of other metropolitan cities and municipalities. So that also helps us a lot. If you want to come in hydropower sector, then CNI would be a perfect platform. Contractors of Nepalese Association is a CNI, and FNCCI, yeah. That's the biggest platform for any big investor to come in to to have a joint partnership, such as CG, Vaidya Group, Rana Groups, Jyoti Groups. So these are like big groups here in Nepal, and you can go to FNCCI and have a conversation with them to partner in a big projects. Last but not the least, investment board definitely, because investment board helps in routing you to where to go and how to invest. Otherwise, having a lack of understanding on market and investing blindly would hamper you a lot. So these are the possible areas where you can go. And if you are coming in for robotics and AI, definitely Robotics Association of Nepal, Nepal Academy of Science and Technology, because we have been working in this market for decades, and we can definitely give you a good routes where to invest your money, how you can bring on those technologies here in Nepal, and what are the government rules and regulations. And they are pretty positive in terms of partnership, because Nepal, as you might know, is more based on international investment, foreign donor funds, and also remittance. So whenever there's an investment coming in from foreign, there's a mindset that could help people to gain more money. So that's a positive sign for any investor to come here in Nepal and invest. I think there's a lot of potential opportunity for this geographically complex country, but a small country like Nepal. And since it's growing and developing, it's a high time if you want to have a secure business.
That's amazing. So much information from Bikash. So what I'm going to do, the first person, I'm going to meet you first and then revise all the information once I come to Nepal. Okay. That's amazing. So much input. Thank you so much, Bikash. And Usama, so every 1 or 2 videos on my YouTube out of 5 is about whether food or traveling about Pakistan in recent 1 year or so. So what's happening there? Like so many food bloggers, so many travel bloggers. And I believe that's a message Pakistan is saying, that come to Pakistan. So while visiting Pakistan, how to establish business, and how you are going to help. So yeah.
All right, an
And
amazing observation. The reason why it has recently changed all this blog sector and all is that, first things first, despite all my differences from the current government or the previous government or any government per se, one thing the current government really did right was realigning Pakistan's foreign policy and its visa regime. So before the first government, there was this reciprocal visa regime that will treat your citizens the way you treat ours in matters of visa application. So that's why, and then again, like I said earlier, that Pakistan has never been on a government level that technologically advanced, applying for a visa, making the arrangements, making an invitation letter arranged, all this, that too when the media is feeding lies with regards to the on-ground situation, always made it a hassle for real, let's say, travelers to come into Pakistan. Yes, there were some people who used to have some commercial interest, and that is why they used to come in. But what this government did was, first things first, they abolished that visa regime. And all of a sudden, almost 130 or so countries were visa free from Pakistan. So you could simply show yourself at the airport and you'll get an e-visa on arrival. Visa on arrival or e-visa. That really took things like that really made it possible for other people to come in without taking into account the hassle of invitation letters, all of the other approvals and all. So unfortunately and sadly enough, like you rightly mentioned, because of this strange political play, whatever there is, that was not really extended to the South Asian region the way it should have been extended to, but it was extended to the global ecosystem. So what happens is that in order to come to Pakistan, as of now, you just book your ticket, just check what are the visa situations for your country, and you come to, let's say, you show up in Pakistan. If you're a tech entrepreneur, I would rather suggest land in Lahore. Or if you are a foodie, land in Lahore. If you are a cultural fanatic, land in Lahore. Like Lahore has been the cultural capital of Pakistan since the beginning. So let's say you acquired the visa, you came over here. The best part about Pakistan is that no matter where you go, one thing we really take pride in is our hospitality and welcoming nature towards our guests. And we don't do bifurcations where you came from. You just came to Pakistan and you said you are a non-Pakistani, doesn't really matter where you are, blah blah. People would even invite you to their homes. If you don't have an accommodation, they would invite you to their food tables. If you don't have food, blah blah. And same notion has been extended to the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. Let's just say you came to Pakistan, you walked in, and I'm not even kidding, you simply walked in without any appointment to any incubator, any co-working space, any place of commercial interest, and you said, hey, I'm this person, and this is my need, this is my ask. Can you help me find relevant people? Every single person, and I've seen this from, like I'm saying this from experience because I met people on that footing who have told me some stories regarding this, and it has been validated. They'll go above and beyond. They'll run an extra mile to connect you with the right people within a day or two. And I'm not even kidding. You just come in to any of these incubators, co-working spaces. So for instance, to name a few, Colabs, Daftar Kwan, Plan 9, Nest.io, and all that, and you'll be sorted. But what would be advisable is that there's this very rigorous Facebook community group by the name of Pakistan Startups on Facebook. I believe you and Andre have been a part of it as well. Before coming, just post whatever there is to be discussed over there, and people would connect you with the right resources. All you have to do is you just have to pack your bags and come to Pakistan. As far as the legal and, let's say, commercial prereqs are concerned, they have been made very lenient with this new visa regime. But you can find any Pakistani and they'll act as your partners and all, even with no interest. like no commercial interest in that, and they'll help you set it up. For instance, one of my friends, you can search this out, Brandon. He flew in from he flew in last year. It's not even been 7 months, and he has made one of the largest fintech startups here in Pakistan by the name of Sadab. Like, his growth is phenomenal and insane, and all was done because of some friendships. He simply came in here, he came to collabs, he made some friends, and they set him up. From resource hiring, like from talent hiring, to other resources like, let's say, commute, logistics, accommodation, blah, blah. And this is how it is. And this is the general sector, but to make it very specific, you come to us, and I'm not saying this for the sake of saying this, you just ping me up, or you just ping A-Clan Pakistan up, will set you up with everything from your workspace to accommodation to your food to your touristic shenanigans, and then also your talent pool.
Amazing. Yeah, that brings me back to the thing I mentioned is about the people. So, the welcoming vibe to it, and welcoming anyone to help out. I believe the friend network has always been an important part of South Asia to live and survive. And that, I believe, what connects us and brings back to home and make us feel close to home. So I wish I could have some more time to discuss even further, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So we'll have to end the conversation here, but I believe we are connected on WhatsApp. We will keep the communication up. So thank you so much, everyone, for the sharing. And we hope to distillate some of this conversation into action. Until then, stay safe and take care. Goodbye. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Shadman.
Thank you, everyone.